I did it on stage in 1982. So that's when I was first introduced to the story and played Albert Nobbs. And it never left me. I acted the part in an off-Broadway theater where you're just feet away from the audience. And I felt the power of this character. You take a character like Albert who doesn't really have the tools to achieve her dream, but she doesn't know that, All she knows is this longing, this possibility that is awakened in her. And it's the story of her trying to achieve that without really the knowledge of how to. And it's her attempt to achieve it that makes us love her, I think. Around her are wonderful characters, and each of them is just trying basically to get by in an incredibly repressive society. Victorian Dublin, Victorian England, that whole time was hugely, and women had no rights, and if you were somebody like Albert, the possibilities were hugely limited, and she was more limited than even that. I always felt it was deeply funny. I think it's actually a human comedy, in that the human comedy is tragic and comic. Like all our great clowns, there's something tragic about them as well as something that makes you laugh. As an actor, you just want the chance to do good work. And you can't do good work unless you have a good story that's well written and that you have wonderful actors around you that you can reflect off of and that will inspire you, and challenge you as you're working. So the incredible feeling that I have now is that I don't think I could have gotten together a better group of people to tell this particular story. I think for some reason, it all came together. We didn't want to create a character like Albert and have everybody in the movie look like idiots because she looked like a woman. You wanted to make a character that is astonishing in her invisibility as who she really is. And not through anything other than what has it done to her face to be embedded as a man, as a butler, waiter for 30 years. What does that do to your face? And I had a picture, actually, that I'd gotten many years ago out of the National Geographic of an Albanian woman who lives in an area of the country where their culture is that if they don't have a male heir, they designate a woman to live as a man. And this is a woman who didn't have any fake beard or mustache. It was an accepted, and it was her face that I've had on my cork board, and Marcel has had it in his research for all these years, and so that was the challenge. It's not someone pretending to be a man. It's someone who's just living as a man. Without that image, the story would never work. But that moment where all of a sudden my face disappeared was a very moving one for me, because I'd always felt that I had to carry around the burden of my face that everybody knew, But all of a sudden I realized with the artistry of someone like Matthew and Marcel, that burden is lifted and you can create somebody totally new. Janet was really key, because for the character of Hubert, you need to have someone who has a face that people won't necessarily, that they won't necessarily recognize. And again, I thought of her, and she was doing Mary Stuart on Broadway. And not only she's a great actress, but she's 6 feet tall. And I thought for Hubert that'd be perfect. So I said, Janet, backstage after Mary Stuart, she gave this incredible performance. I said, I have this, you kind of come as a, a supplicant. And I have this thing, and I gave her, I didn't even assume. I said, can I send it to you? Would you be willing to read it? And she said yes. So I sent it to the theater, and I don't know if it was a few days or a week later, but she said she loved it and she wanted to do it. And again, she stuck with it through thick and thin, through changes of schedule and pushing back, and her energy again has informed everything. I mean, Janet is one of the great. She enters a room and everybody is, enhanced. And I think we all felt that. Even though I'm sure that he's as insecure as all of us, he comes from such a place of he's inclusive. He's not intimidated by people's ideas or their insecurities or the crises that might happen. I think he has a great sense of humor that informs everything, gives him great space and perspective. To have all these extraordinary people, these really extraordinary artists show up for this, even though because of having to raise money and how it all fell together, we had to keep postponing to a certain degree. To have them actually get on airplanes and show up and get in the van and come, that is something I will never be able to truly thank them for, except I feel that we all feel it was time well spent, It was, I think everybody feels that they are in something that they can be proud of. And now, it's all of ours. And that's, the process for us who create things. The process is everything. If you have joy, challenge in the process, that's it. You can walk away happy. Aaron is a very, very gifted actor. He's and he wants to do significant stuff. He wants to develop himself as an actor. He wants to work on pieces that will challenge him, and I think that's why he came. Mia adores Rodrigo, who basically discovered her, so that goes a long way. The opportunity, I think they felt to work together again, and also, but it was a story that she loved. So, it's all very, it goes much deeper than just, an agent calling an actor and saying, there's this piece of material, There are a lot more connections than that. God, she is a beautiful human being, way beyond just being a very innately gifted actress. She's a beautiful person. Well, I went with this story to many of my friends, many wonderfully gifted, wonderful people. And as anybody in this profession knows, it really comes down to a question of timing for a lot of people. And I had met Istvan Szabo, who's a wonderful Hungarian director. Loved working with him and learned a lot from him. And I took the story to Istvan at one point, and he really understood it. He actually understood the politics of it. I've always believed in its power as a simple story with huge resonance. He kind of lifted it to a different level with his treatment. And then 10 years ago, no, it was more than 10 years ago, 11 years ago, I commissioned Gabby Prekop, who was Istvan's translator, to do the first whack at a script. She wanted the chance, so I said, sure, go ahead. So Gabby did the first go round, and then I needed it to be Irishized, and went to my friend Stephen Frears, who knows about writers. He says, these wonderful writers, and he mentioned John Banville, and I called John Banville out of the blue, kind of ignorant of the fact that he's one of the great living Irish writers. Sometimes it's good to not know things. And he came on board and did a full, his own, he did two, the usual script and a brush up, and two versions and a brush up. This project would have been dead in the water many times over if it wasn't for Bonnie's unbelievable belief. I could believe, but I didn't know how to make it happen, and we didn't know how to make it happen. And Bonnie twice called me and said, I just had an epiphany. And it was a whole new out-of-the-box, avenue to go to try to find money from people who had never... And that kind of tenacity and that really creative audacity, really, to say, well, just because it hasn't done before doesn't mean it can't be done now. And to find the one person from a whole different side of life who had never put money into anything like this before, the one person who would get it and say from an emotional place, this is what I want to do, and here's this money. Do you know how hard that is? The kind of stories that I love is that you create an emotional connection with anyone who's watching it that means something, that will either change them for a couple of minutes or, for a week, or it might leave thoughts in their head that will actually make a difference. And I think we all seek to find those stories and to be able to tell them. But we can't tell them if we don't have the opportunity, and we don't have the opportunity if we don't have the money. And to find that person who will believe, in that vision and in that passion and that story is that's what it's all about.
When someone's got a passion in it and they've carried it for like 15 years or as long as Glenn has, you have this strong kind of belief in it, or she does, and you kind of want to be a part of that journey in as such. And so yeah, it was kind of a real sort of collaboration of creative people, He's this ambitious guy who's got really high hopes and dreams, and I love kind of characters like that, and can relate to those sort of characters, and but understand the sort of struggle that kind of keeps holding him back to be able to accomplish those sort of those dreams, and to keep moving forward. There's always someone blocking your way, and the sort of struggle, and the scenes with my character and Mia's character were just so natural and moving, and it was those sort of moments that I found that I sort of felt instinctive for that character. So I knew in my mind I could kind of grab it at in some sort of way, and take it take it from there. He doesn't want to be long anywhere, really. He wants to get on his high horse and go to America, you know. But at the same time falls in love with this girl, this woman, and wants to take her with him. And you know, there is at one point he gets an opportunity to take front of house and a higher job ranking, but it's his lack of education and the fact that he can't read and write has sort of allowed him to only stay at one place, and that's not where he wants to be. So as kind of ties in with all the other issues that he has, and on the script it was, I just sort of, I guess I saw as you know, you see it sort of kind of laughing around, like kind of making jokes and cynical remarks and kind of joking about and being a bit, you know, cheeky and naughty and stuff like that. But I feel like it, which she does brilliantly, but I think she kind of gives the character a lot more kind of soul and more kind of lovingness, this sort of maybe kind of, you know, this mothering kind of this quality to it, you know. He's just a really brilliant guy with, you know, great direction and makes you feel confident enough to kind of to explore it and help kind of, he really loves characters and breaking it down and working with actors and finding that that sort of quality. You know, I'd work with him in a heartbeat, you know, again. Yeah, I'm constantly trying to find, you know, different scripts and, you know, different characters, and I'll try and change it up as much as I can. And you know, I'm interested in sort of actors like that, you know, like Gary Oldman and you know, Day-Lewis and people like that, you know. So yeah, it's just more fun, I think, you know.
In terms of the story, he is the person who allows Albert to be more himself. He allows the person to allow himself to dream, or to dream of love, to dream of not being alone. Hubert is a woman who's lived her life as a man and has a wife. She's incredibly happy. She is herself. She's more happy as Hubert than she ever would be as her other female self. I don't know what that name ever was. We never find out. And in seeing Hubert and Hubert's wife be so happy together, that allows Albert to dream that actually you can love regardless of gender, sex, race, colour, whatever. I think Albert has lived his life by avoiding any kind of relationship whatsoever, and fills his life with work and the sort of dream of some sort of idyllic future that probably will never happen. And Hubert is more less damaged, I think, or more resilient perhaps, who has suffered from, you know, in her past, and who then lives her life as a man, and then finds that she's happiest as a man, and then meets her wife, his wife, her wife, and they fall madly in love, and they're very happy together. So that's fine. She's just who she is, and she accepts that, and that's the big thing. She's the one character for Albert who just says, well, I am what I am, and that's just fine. Well, in this room, Hubert accidentally realises that Albert is a woman, and Hubert has a fabulous sense of humour, and he doesn't know Albert. And I think Hubert at first is thinking, you know, I don't believe it. In all the bars in all the world, I end up in this one, in another room with a guy dressed as a woman dressed as a man. That's just very funny. I think she thinks it's incredibly ironic and rather funny. And, you know, she has her own life to keep. So she's not going to say anything until she knows what she thinks about it. Oh, she's phenomenal. She's absolutely fantastic. She's one of those people who, because she plays Patty Hughes and because she's been in several films where she's been, oh, I don't know, the president or whatever, but I think people are often quite frightened of her because they think she's quite tough and all of that. And she's a huge perfectionist, don't get me wrong, but she is such fun and she's so warm and she's so kind and she's incredibly professional, which I really admire, as well as all of her other artistic qualities. She's great. We've become really good mates. I think she's fantastic, really fantastic. Rodrigo. I mean, I described Rodrigo in an email the other day as a cross between Buddha, Woody Allen and Antonio Banderas. He's just sort of, he's this gorgeous, incredibly kind, big-hearted, very clever, sexy, lovely, wonderful man. And he'll come in just with the odd little idea here and there, or the twist on a take, or, you know. And when I was in New York before I shot this, I would go to a couple of, I would be out and about, and somebody would say, oh, what are you doing? And I'd say, and they'd say, who's directing it? And I'd say, and every single actor in the room would go, oh, he's great, I loved working with him. He's just adored, and rightly so. He's fantastic. I'd work with him again in a heartbeat. As a woman, I'm quite, I guess I'm a bit of an alpha woman, I suppose. And, you know, I have a deep voice and I am 6'1", and I think as a guy I'm not scared of it. And I think to play someone who lives their life as a man and gets away with it could be scary. And I personally think it's funny. And I think Hubert thinks it's funny. And I think that's the key. You know, Hubert flirts terribly with any woman around. And he's just a charming Irish bloke. And I think that's, whilst being totally 100% committed to his woman, who is the love of his life. And I just think I think that's great. I would love to be a guy just for a day, genuinely, just to see what it was really like. I'd love it.
He's a medical doctor who has a great feel for the ladies, and has been married in Belfast and was conducting an affair and loved both. Unfortunately, they wanted exclusive rights over his attentions. So he bailed out, went down to Dublin, and has been living in this hotel for a while now. Where he drinks too much and has a kind of a surrogate home, I suppose, for want of a better term. Yeah, I love the script for a start, and the role had possibilities in a way, in a very, you know, I mean, it's not, he has an interesting impact on the hotel. And in some way, there's something actually healthy about the sexuality that's involved with Halloran that is missing in a lot of the other things that are going on. There's so much repression going on. And Halloran is somebody who isn't governed by that. In fact, maybe he could do it at a bit at that time. And Glenn obviously has, she's been a long time with this, and she has very, very clear ideas of where she's going with it. And it's wonderful when there's a quality of detail brought to everything about it. You know, there's she's obviously a fantastic actress, but it's the eye for detail. It's the eye for the heart of what's going on. The meticulous approach to the way even the dialogue is handled. You know, the fact that John Banville was brought on board to get a cultural, to give the proper cultural input for things that wouldn't, it would be very difficult to understand for somebody from outside. There's a professionalism and a creative a creative sort of ambition that I really admire. And it's been fantastic. I mean, the spirit on this set has been really, really great. But in The Greatest Tragedy, there is huge place for comedy and just the ludicrous nature of life, and the tragedies that make such idiots of us all, and the aspirations that make such idiots of us all, and just the whole lunacy of being on the planet. And I think the great thing about this has been, about doing it, has been to take something that is so poignant and so inherently sad and have such a good time with it and have such a good laugh with it. And the characters are beautifully drawn by all these fantastic people who are coming in, you know, Pauline Collins and Janet McTeer and all these people are coming in. As you say, it's a fantastic ensemble piece. And they're all bringing all these kind of little quirky kind of humanity to each of the characters. So it's terrific.
I love my character because she is, in a way, all things to all men, but at the centre of her, because she's always performing and trying to impress people or bully them. But at the centre of her is somebody who's extremely controlling and very ambitious, and at times a bit cruel, which is nice. Well, I think she approaches the way she treats her staff. First of all, she likes to appear as though she's looking after them all and is a bit benevolent, but underneath she uses every one of them. And in Albert, I think she has, you know, like the kind of good child syndrome. She has somebody who never puts a foot wrong, who is completely immersed in the job and who seems to do anything Mrs. Baker asks her to do. So I think, you know, she would love Albert to stay forever. Morrison's hotel it's kind of a place I would like to stay, I think, because I like things that are a bit faded around the edge, being a little that way myself. And so is Mrs. Baker described as that. And it reminds me, it should be in a seaside town, I think. It's got a faded grandeur and was probably rather beautiful once. And there's a certain kind of person who comes here. They tend to be gentility or people who've just come a step down in life, apart from the lords and ladies who think they're slumming it by coming to Morrison's. And they treat it in a kind of patronising way. When I read the script, I thought it was so beautiful, so wonderful, that I would have been happy to do one scene in this film. I think it's a unique story. I think it'll be a very, very special film. I've never heard of anything like it, and that's why I want to be in it. Working with Glenn is great. On this job particularly, I am full of admiration for her because on the whole, actors concentrate on what they do, which is to act. She manages to produce, write, still write, while we're working. And I remember on the last job we did, she would be running to the set on her bike with a few new scenes. She manages to do all of those and act the leading role without going into a sweat, which is amazing. And I asked her the other day if she was tired, and she said no. So I think all those three roles energise each other and make her into a powerhouse. He's warm, loving, a wonderful director, and he manages to give you the right note just when you need it. And I would love to work with him again. I think he's great.
It's the story of Albert Nobbs. I guess I'm not, unlocking any secret. It's a woman in 19th century Ireland who, through a series of circumstances, just to make her way in life, to make a living, started passing as a young man, as a boy, working as a waiter, helping in kitchens, and has had a successful run as a waiter and has been doing it for over 30 years, and has worked her way up to be a butler in a family-run hotel. And that is when we meet her. Nobody around her knows her secret. She is Albert, a very accomplished butler. It's rare to find a script that mixes a great character, a moving story, a story that is funny, that is heartbreaking, that is about, people trying to make their way in the world, not only in practical terms, making a living, trying to survive, but also trying to keep their identity alive. That problem of, how can I be who I really am, is a universal problem. And it's not just in repressed societies or in repressed communities or in repressed sexualities. It's everywhere. We want to please our surroundings, and how much are we willing to hide of our identity in order to survive? So I think that's universal and is very well. And again, the movie is not a speech like I've just given. It's a terrific story, and those are the themes underneath. It's about people trying to make do, trying to survive, trying to find their niche in a world that may or may not be ready for who they are, or that does not accept who they are. So I think the idea of, identity and how do I fit the real me with the world around me, hopefully that's what audiences will connect to. I think that's a, timeless theme. I've been attached for about 5 or 6 years. I worked with Glenn on a couple of movies. After we did the last one, 9 Lives, she showed me the script to see if I was interested. And, obviously I was flattered that she thought of me. And, and she's a very good actor to work with. She's very hardworking, prepares a great deal, is not just instinctive, but also methodical and analyzes things and is intelligent. And I liked her approach to the work. She's very much about the work. So I felt, that I could work with her. And then I read the script, and that obviously made it easier because the script just worked. Studios used to make movies like this. Now they don't. Now they're independent movies. They're the so-called art house movies. So there isn't the money that there was, but, people like the story, and they know it's not only with Glenn, but that it's, her project, one of her dream projects of her life. So she's brought, people that she's worked with before, of course, like Pauline Collins or myself, and, other people like Brenda Fricker or Brendan Gleeson, and, young actors like Aaron and Mia. It's, she's someone who can center a project beautifully. Yeah, I feel like she's my movie daughter, is what I call her. We met on In Treatment, which was, she'd done a couple things in Australia, but I think In Treatment was, the first thing that sort of, showed her to a wider audience, and she hasn't stopped since. She has several movies coming out, and of course it was Alice, and just a terrific actress. I don't know where a 21-year-old gets this experience, not just with acting, but with life, but she's really, I think, great. Great. I'd seen him in 2 movies. I'd seen him in Nowhere Boy and in Kick-Ass. And I could hardly, in my mind, I couldn't really remember that they were the same guy. They were so different. And again, he's 20. I don't know when he learned how to act. I don't know when he learned how to understand the characters the way he does. There's just something that both he and Mia have. They have a level of artistry and sensitivity that's amazing. I'm working with them. I forget that they could be my children. They're colleagues. It's remarkable. I feel like I've connected very much with the Irish people. They feel somewhat like Latin Americans to me. And I think, they have a similar sense of humor and a similar reluctance to take yourself too seriously. And everyone's great. Most of our crew is Irish, as are many of, the actors. It's been good. I hope to be back.
what appealed to me about the script was really not the script at first. It was a chance to work with Bonnie, who we just fell in love pretty much immediately, and Rodrigo, who I've done so much work with. But as soon as you get involved with the script, you see that it's incredibly timely, even though it's a period piece. I mean, it deals with so many issues of gender association and what it means to make a living in the world, make your way in the world, what it means to be lonely, what it means to have lived without love, what it means to wake up and see your life for the first time. And Glenn has done such a beautiful job with the script.
It's great that it's shot in Dublin. I mean, the fact that it's situated here in a part of Dublin that, Georgian Dublin, which, let's face it, there isn't as much of it left as we'd like. And so much of Dublin's history is there. And, the writing, you can see the influences that it had on contemporaries of the time, such as Joyce and Beckett, and writers of that ilk, and to see that, to be part of that story, I suppose, in some shape or form, is just great.
I think we're all initially here for Glenn, and I think what has happened in the process, in speaking for myself, is I've fallen just as deeply in love with Albert Nobbs. So, to trust her vision and to get on board to help her realize this passion project that she has had on her forefront of her mind for almost 20 years, but then to come out of the other end of it as passionate, I think has been the real gift for everybody.
Every single person of the cast and every single person on the crew knows that this has been her dream for more than a decade. And this is not the kind of movie that's easy to get made. It's a period drama with a grown-up female lead. So it's sort of the quadrifecta of financing disaster. And I think everyone is really moved by how much Glenn has invested in this story, from writing it, to producing it, to hand-carrying it, all the way, and now to being the lead actor. And everyone is incredibly invested in seeing it through to the end, don't you think? Yeah. And it's been fun. We're having a great time. The crew here is amazing.
We have an Academy Award-winning team, that just makes coming to work every day and seeing what they've done and the production value that is on screen with a minimal amount of money.
Michael McDonough, you heard it here first.
Yeah, our director of photography. But yeah, it's just a pleasure. I'm excited to wake up every morning, and come, which is true, and I haven't experienced that in a very long time.
Well, we had some weather challenges, but the snow looks beautiful on screen. People won't believe that we actually had that much snow in Ireland, will they?
We still can't believe we had that much snow in Ireland. Yeah.
The jigsaw puzzle of putting such an incredible cast together, which in any ensemble is a challenge, but people have been really great about working with their schedules. That's always, tied to when locations are available, that jigsaw puzzle. But that's part of the fun of what we do. I mean, we enjoy that, so.
I think it's a story about survival and the struggle for survival among small people, among the invisible people, the people who in the 19th century would have your fire going and your bath filled before you got up. You never saw them. They came up and down the back stairs. They came from below stairs up the back stairs. They were rarely seen. They were, largely ignored. Albert Nobbs has been working in the hotel for a long time, decades. He has survived by pretending to be a he. Like all movie projects, it took a long time. It must be 8 or 10 years ago that Glenn came to me first with a script written by Gabriela Prekop, a Hungarian writer. Glenn wanted it to sound authentically Irish. Over the months that we worked on it at that time, and subsequently, more recently, when it's actually got going, We changed it a great deal. We restructured it, and we did a lot with it. But the essential story was there from the story by George Moore. Well, there's a little piece of dialogue between the doctor and Albert in the fancy dress party scene, which I honestly can't remember if I wrote it or if Gabriella wrote it or if Glenn wrote it. I suspect I wrote it, because the doctor says to Albert, "Are you not getting dressed up in fancy dress?" And Albert says, "Well, I'm a waiter." And the doctor, who's dressed as a doctor in the fancy dress party, says, "And I'm dressed as a doctor." We're both pretending to be ourselves. That would represent a theme very dear to my heart, how we make ourselves in the world, how we present ourselves to the world as a specific thing, whereas in fact behind the mask we're a chaos of hundreds of characters. I think that it's based on an experience that he had. I think when George Moore was a little boy, as in the story, I think he did stay in a hotel in Dublin, and there may have been an Albert Nobbs there, somebody who was living a pretend life, but I don't know. But when you read the story, it sort of smacks of, always in fiction that's based on true stories, there's sort of bits of skin attaching to the narrative, bits of the actual stuff. So I feel that to some extent it probably is based on a true story. The Viscount is a small, but it is a significant role. It shows the attitude, or if you like, the lack of attitude among the ruling class towards the underclass. The system couldn't have been sustained if there had been awareness and sympathy for the people who were pulling the buckets of coal and the jugs of water up the back stairs at 5 o'clock in the morning. Because if you started to have sympathy for them, and if you started to notice them, give them real attention, you would realize the injustice that was being done to them, and the system would begin to crumble. I love writing it. I love the fact that my words are literally fleshed out, that real flesh and blood people will speak my lines. I remember the first time I did a movie back in the early 80s, and I went down to the set. And first of all, I was completely fooled by everything in the set. You know, I tried to play the piano, and of course it wasn't a piano, it had no sound. And I looked at the cracks in the wall and went out closer, and there weren't cracks in the wall, and I was absolutely fascinated by this. But then these people started to speak my lines, and it was a absolutely magical moment, and I've never got over that. I mean, I'm still completely childish, you know, open-mouthed, agape at people speaking my lines. Look, they're saying what I wrote. So it's a great thrill. Yeah?